Well, my editing skills are crap, but can the same thing be said about Birdman or The Unexpected Virtue of Ignorance? Stick around and find out. Oh crap, I broke my thing! Oh man! Oh, I was gonna do this awesome drum solo, and like the plastic knife just totally snapped off of my sign. Ah. All right, hey, I'm Peter Franson from Spirit Blade Productions and Christian Geek Central here with an uncut review of Birdman, starring Michael Keaton. Now, this movie is about an actor who was part of a huge superhero franchise about 20 years ago, and then he decided he wasn't going to make any more movies, even though they made him a huge success and a big star. But when he diverted from what was making him famous, he suddenly had no other film opportunities, and for the last 20 years, he's been off the radar of Hollywood. Well, now he's trying to regain his popularity or his significance or his value or worth in the eyes of the public or whoever by reinventing himself as a playwright and director and actor on the stage. And so this movie is about him trying to get that play ready to go, and all the problems that are happening during the rehearsals and the casting and all this kind of stuff, and just his stress over really wanting this to work. All this money and passion and time he's invested into this, and he's just kind of the underdog, and it's looking like it's just going to be a complete disaster. And hanging on all of this is where who financially he's got a lot of hanging on it, but even more than that, his whole identity, his whole sense of self-worth and significance is wrapped up in whether or not this play succeeds. And meanwhile, he's constantly plagued and haunted by the voice of this kind of Birdman type character who's telling him, hey, you were awesome, you were a star, you should just go back and put the costume on and, be Birdman again, and people would just like love you all over again, So anyway, and not only that, but whenever he's by himself and nobody's around, then we see him using these telekinetic powers to just throw things around and do different things, just with the power of his mind. And throughout the whole movie, we're kind of, as an audience, wondering, is he insane or does he really have superpowers? What kind of a movie is this? It doesn't, you don't really get a sense until the close to the very end of the movie, and even then you could still argue that it's in question whether or not he is insane or really has these powers or whatever. This is an indie film, it's an artsy film. If you are going to this to get like a geek itch scratched, then I hate to disappoint you, but that geeky itch is probably not going to be scratched. When I saw the trailer to this movie, it definitely looked like an independent film to me. But if you watch, and I'll try to put a link to the trailer I'm talking about in the description of this video. But if you watch the Birdman official U.S. release trailer, which came out about 5 months ago or something like that, the impression that I got from that, and see if you get the same impression. The impression I got from that is that yes, it's an artsy film, but it's gonna be also lots of not maybe lots of visual effects, but frequent visual effects throughout the movie, and it's gonna be about the trailer calls into question this idea of, man, this guy maybe really does have superpowers, and this movie, it looks like maybe it's going to culminate in him revealing the fact that he has superpowers to the entire world and just like dazzling everybody, when they just thought that he was Birdman just as an actor and a character. He really has all these powers. There was just kind of some, if you look at the way that trailer is cut, there are indications in that trailer, I think, that we are meant to, that we were, I feel fooled. I feel fooled by the trailer. Anyway, let's get into my notes a little bit more. So I told you the synopsis, the story, the script, the pacing. Okay, it's slow at times. This is an independent film. People walking around and talking and stuff like that. It's that kind of movie. That's not to say that it's not interesting. I was very interested in, maybe not interested is the best word, but curious. I was curious. I was like, where's this going? What's that? But I wasn't like riveted, and like really engaged, mentally, and wasn't engaged really emotionally by this movie. And there was a few moments where it was slow. I would say that one of the biggest things that hurts this movie is that there are some what seemed to me to be pointless moments. And very often they were attached to these kind of sexually energized scenes, whether it was just kind of sexual humor or it was like two people kissing that you didn't expect to be kissing up to that point in the movie. They're just suddenly kissing, or a relationship that gets formed and people that, they start kind of sleeping together or whatever. And there's no nudity in this movie, but it definitely has a number of sexually charged moments throughout the movie. And many of them seem pointless. I'm just like, well, what's going on with that? It's like, okay, we're given this moment, this kind of like sexualized moment between these two characters, and then where does that go in any future scenes? Nowhere. And there are multiple instances of that throughout this movie that just made me feel like these were unneeded moments. They're just pointless. I would say that this is a technically fascinating movie, and by that I mean, for people that are interested in the craft of filmmaking, the craft of acting for film, I think they'll find it very interesting. I can't help but wonder if that's why it's getting so much buzz. And I also can't help but wonder if that was maybe a big draw to some of the big name faces that we see in this movie. The movie is filmed to feel and look like it's all done in one take all the way through without any cuts. Now, if you know that going into the movie, then you can kind of see where some of those transitional cuts are happening. But even having said that, it's made up of a ton of really long takes throughout the whole movie. And so from an actor standpoint, many actors prefer the stage because they can really just kind of get into a scene and not be interrupted, and not have all these kind of technical things getting in the way and disrupting the experience of performing these characters. So I can see that actors that really would like to have a film experience that's more like a theater experience, that this would be a really exciting opportunity to them. And I would think for people that know that about the movie will be very interested in watching it, just as a technical exercise, and they'll be just fascinated by the craft of it. But as far as an experience of sitting down and getting involved in a story, whether on an intellectual level or on an emotional level, this movie really fell far short for me. Let's see here. The cast. Okay. Finally freaking remembered my sign. Okay, so we've got Michael Keaton and, oh crap. A bunch of other people. I can't remember any of their names. The gal that was in The Ring, I think it's her. She's a blonde lady. And the other blonde lady that was that was Gwen Stacy in the recent Spider-Man movies. And I totally know her name, but it's not coming to my mind right now. And Edward Norton, I remember that name. He was the Hulk in The Incredible Hulk. There's Zach Galifianakis, I think is how you say his name, something in that ballpark. So there's definitely a lot of familiar faces. And you know what? These guys all bring their A game. Wonderful performances. I mean, they are fascinating to watch. But it's odd because even though I was looking at them and I was like, wow, these are some great performances. That's what I was thinking. I was thinking, wow, these are some great performances. But I wasn't truly drawn in to these characters like I want to be when I go see a movie. I already talked about the editing. There's some cool visual effects in here when he kind of goes into Birdman mode, where we're wondering if it's real or not and stuff like that, So there are, peppered throughout, but kind of sparsely, there are these little telekinesis kind of visual effect kind of moments. And then there's one big moment that you'll see a lot of in the trailer for this movie, where like helicopters are shooting guns and things are blowing up and stuff like that, and it's very brief, but it gets a lot of time in the trailer. I think a deceptive amount of time in the cut of the US trailer. And you know what? I can't help but judge movies in part based on their marketing scheme, because their marketing tells me this is the kind of movie you're going to see. It's kind of like with Exodus, Gods and Kings. This is come see a biblical movie. I went, but there was no miracles or the supernatural, and it was all kind of iffy in that movie. It's like, was it real or was it not? And I'm okay with that. But with this trailer, with the amount of percentage of time in the trailer given to visual effects and superhero-y kind of moments, I wanted a larger percentage of that represented in the story. Or at least maybe just like I wanted that whole is he or is he not a superhero to be a larger part of the story. And And yeah, so I was disappointed in that regard. The soundtrack, the music is very, it's kind of an interesting take. They use a jazz drummer, which is why I did the jazz thing that broke my thing at the beginning. It's kind of interesting, but I wasn't sure how I was supposed to feel. I feel like one of the things that music can do for you in movies is help you kind of feel a little bit of what's going on, and I wasn't quite sure. I think sometimes it helped kind of build a sense of tension and maybe stress, and help you feel a little bit of the stress of the main character. But other than that, there were some times where I was just like, he's just kind of grooving. I don't know what this is supposed to be doing for me. If anything, it might have contributed to my detachment and just kind of like, all right, here we go, watching a movie, as opposed to really engaging emotionally with the characters. Now, in terms of philosophical, moral, or spiritual issues that might come to mind or be easy conversation after seeing this movie, I think one of the big themes in this movie is validation. The main character wants validation. The producer, played by Zach Galifianakis, also wants validation. That's why he became a part of this project with the main character, whose name I can't really remember. Birdman, we'll call him. And they're all really banking on this play and the success of this play, getting them in the limelight, giving them significance again. And it's not necessarily all about fame, because there's a moment when Birdman's walking down the street and he's contemplating this, and he's got the Birdman voice going on in his head, that's basically saying, don't do this stupid play. People don't want to watch this. You could do one more movie, just put on the suit again, and it'll be a blockbuster, and you'll be famous, and people will just worship you, and it'll be, and the voice said, they don't want this, this boring, slow, talky, philosophical stuff, and I feel like that was kind of like a meta moment in the movie where they were kind of maybe saying that, because this is a talky, philosophical kind of movie. And geeks might be expecting, when they go see this movie, maybe a little bit more of the explosions and stuff. They even referenced, like, the Birdman voice in his head said, you go to this movie and, like, what did he say? Like, pimply gamers will go like nuts, So they even, like, kind of called out the geek crowd. And it almost felt a little bit like they were saying the geek crowd, that's kind of like the lowest common denominator, and that there's really no value in going and creating an entertaining experience for them. What you really want to do is this high art, something that's meaningful in terms of it being high art, so in some ways it felt just a tad pretentious, maybe. I don't know. I feel like they didn't really quite commit to maybe the message of their movie, and one way in which I felt that is they were kind of comparing these two polar opposites of, like, these big, empty, shallow Hollywood blockbusters with, they called them at one point, just kind of like these big Hollywood, it's pornography. They compared it to pornography, just being completely empty and just like the lowest form of pleasure, and comparing that to, like, this play, this high art that he wants to do. And yet throughout this movie, which I think is kind of like trying to make a statement of, well, I'm confused, actually. I'm confused. Yeah, I feel like their message could have been maybe a little bit more clear, but it was a mixed message, because, like, it was a talky, philosophical movie, but then it had these really lowbrow kind of like sex humor kind of moments and some other pointless, slow things, and then if it was going for a message of, human worth is about more than the recognition we get from others. Human worth is about more than even maybe the art that we put out there, that human worth is just is intrinsically part of, who we are. And I would agree with that, absolutely. As image bearers of God, we have tremendous worth that has nothing to do with what we achieve, what we're good at, or how attractive we are. So yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. But yet the ending of the movie, I'm just going to see if I can describe this without spoiling it. The end of the movie, it undermines that message, They could have taken it in a direction that he would really have this kind of light bulb moment, and he kind of leaves behind his previous conceptions about where his worth would come from. But he kind of, yeah, if you see the movie, I think you'll feel like, maybe like I did, that, well, maybe you won't, yeah. I'm kind of a weird person. Yeah. Yeah, I feel like it was undermining. I can't talk spoilers. I don't want to talk spoilers, but I feel like it was undermining itself. There was no growth of the character, and they seem to be wanting him to have growth at the end, and kind of like setting aside some bad thinking that he'd had prior to the end of the movie. But I didn't feel like they gave us a good enough reason for that. In fact, at the end of the movie, he has every reason to maintain his let me put it this way. At the end of the movie, he has every reason to maintain his view that fame is the source of validation and worth in his life. He has every reason to think that at the end of the movie. But yet they try to give us this moment at the end where he seems to be kind of like pushing that thinking aside, saying goodbye to the voices that would tell him that his worth, comes from what he accomplishes in the eyes of others. It's yeah. Maybe I'm just not smart enough for this movie. So I guess to wrap it up, I would say if I were a time traveler, I'd go back in time and say, Pater, skip it. Skip it. If you want to see, there's a bunch of movies you can see, obviously, to scratch your geek itch. But if you want to see a better talky philosophical movie that kind of has some geek undertones and some geek appeal, okay, Primer. Go check out Primer. Predestination. I just reviewed that recently on this channel. The Booth at the End. That's a Hulu show that had 2 seasons, but you can watch them because the episodes are really short. If you watch them all strung together, each season would be like the length of a movie. And those are definitely 2 people sitting down, very talky, very philosophical, but it doesn't compromise at all on the geek factor, despite the fact that there are no visual effects in that story, in those seasons. Fascinating stuff. The Booth at the End. And Defendor, the Woody Harrelson movie that's a deconstruction of the superhero genre that I think is much more gratifying and interesting and certainly more emotionally involving than this film. Okay, so it's rated R for language throughout, some sexual content, and brief language. Final score. Oh, crap. I forgot to decide this before starting this review. Final score. Quality. Offhand, I guess I would give it a 6.0 out of 10. No, that's probably being too harsh because the actors' performances were really something to watch. But again, if they're just interesting to watch, but they're not compelling and drawing me in, 6.5. I'll give it a 6.5 in quality, and in relevance, I'll give it a 7.5. I don't think it's too easy to start conversation or some worthwhile thought processes after watching this movie. All right, that's it. ChristianGeekCentral.com. For what? I don't know. There's lots of neat people there that are a lot smarter than I am that you can hang out with. So yeah, I hope you'll join us there soon as we continue to geek out and seek the truth.